Chapter 2. What comes around again.
Oh, my Celestia!
I gazed at her in happy surprise, mixed with feeling sorry for her state. A bunch of bruises on her face. A few more, plus some cuts running on her sides.
What kind of mess found you?
I looked at her, having a sneaking suspicion about how this exactly happened, but I did let her explain to be sure. The mint-coated mare was clearly exhausted. Her white mane seemed dusty. Couldn't gather much more from her cutie mark, but still, I was happier than words can ever say to see someone come out here to me.
Well, what happens when you tell someone you disagree and tell them they're wrong?
She motioned towards her injuries on her sides.
It's what they did when I told them that what you said back there had some truth to it. Damn suckers immediately started beating me up, but I bounced before they could shoot me.
She sighed, shakily on her hooves. I had no clue how to make those potions that heal others, and I was out fresh, though I would make a decent errand pony if someone had me gather the ingredients. However, a pretty quick fix came to mind.
Name's Compound,
she muttered while she was sipping a healing potion from a shop there. The vendor was surprised to see, well, both of us, since I'm also not a common sight in New Appaloosa. I'm New Leaf. I grinned and smiled at her, hoping she'd get better soon, while I'd given the stallion, who was known as Septic, by the way, the proper payment for his service.
Never heard either of your names around our town. Compound, do make sure you give yourself some rest during the rest of the day.
He nodded, then looked back at me.
I insist you two get down to the bar tonight. You know, hang out. Have fun, even if...
wasteland. He pointed to the wastelands outside it. He had a point. I was shy at first, but I did really need to get my head onto better thoughts. And maybe I could make more friends. Friendship, a strong virtue, with more persistence than life itself, and equally difficult to understand, yet worth every single moment.
I'm down for it. How about you, Compound?
I turned to the sweet unicorn mare, who looked a lot better without that wacky excuse for proper clothing that I'd seen on her before I got to meet her here.
Sounds swell, Doc.
She nodded and then turned to me.
Say, New Leaf, what do you do in this town?
Shoot, bad timing for a solid question.
Think, Leaf, think.
Finally. There was not a lot to horse around for me, but I could maybe sweet-talk my way out of it, hoping he maybe wasn't of the super observant type, which was bad to assume out of a medical pony.
You see, I teleport ponies around in the wastelands, wherever they wish to go,
I explained with a lot of confidence in a smile of mine. I got to help ponies, and it's what I like to do, and it would someday get me close to do what I meant to do in this post-war world. The Celestial Sisters made that order clear many, many decades ago, so here I stand.
He was thinking, apparently. Oh, Celestia, help me already. Wait, the orb that occasionally teleports ponies in this town behind the rail yard? You're meaning to tell me that's yourself? You must be an awfully gifted unicorn, then.
He nodded and grinned at me, seemingly having figured something out.
But that thing has been around even when my great-great-great-great-great-dad taught me how to cure ponies, and well, you don't look that old.
He went on. How much was it going to get tortured today?
Well, good on you then. Keep it up,
he added, puzzled on why I was apparently pretty young and somehow around for multiple generations of his family. But I wasn't going to stick around until he solved that one. He knew the orb was my doing, and that's as much as I'd hoped he'd conclude from what I'd said. He never asked me to take off my saddlebag, so my wings were just as concealed as the sun above. I had shown Compound where I had lived here, quickly using the huge box to cover up my entrance once you were inside. That thing was a lifesaver. I watched Compound gaze at my home, which I thought was sort of modest, but she was amazed at the place.
You made all this yourself?
Great. More uncomfortable questions. Round 2. Fight!
Well, this used to be a farmer pony land before ponies started to settle here and New Appaloosa came into existing, so finders keepers.
I'd known this place before it became a town, and I came here after breaking out of the stable, and to my surprise, this was still here, minus the box, of course.
Books, tech stuff, and...
She gasped wider even more, staring at my bed, which was, well, big and a comfy mattress. Apparently an unknown thing to her. She trotted up to it and gave it a feel with one of her front hooves.
This is... Wow. You should know how to live all right.
I told her about the orb, how it worked, and everything. Then I'd practice another virtue known very well in pre-war Equestria. I used my levitation, levitated a spare saddlebag I had around with some lighter equipment. And yes, I am the kind of pony who collects a lot of stuff that might not see much use, other than catching dust.
Here you go, those are lifesavers.
Whoa, I'm your first day and I'm already getting gifts?
She joked and gave me a surprising wink.
But you sure are a lot more generous and kind-hearted than the butt monkeys back where I came from.
She slipped it onto her back while extensively gazing at my home.
But you're seriously sick with your magic. Long-range teleports and lightning?
She chuckled in what I perceived as admiration. Fear was absent this time around.
Not shabby at all.
I was probably one of the best magic wielders around, but I hated scaring ponies by unleashing just what I was able to do. Speaking of the raiders she came from, those would be my next target, especially since they technically knew where I would be. However, a gang of raiders getting into this very town is as likely as a dancing rock. Outside of town, they would outnumber me unless I made the first move. Well, I'm not finished with that lot. I finally burst out of my thought. I want to know who they're working for. No pony selling pony folk under my watch. She sat down next to me and explained finally.
You see, well, they collect ponies for the supervisors, who use them as they see fit. Slaves, rape, torture, the stronger ones got to join, or, well, perish.
Regretting very visibly who she had been working for. I could feel my blood pressure rising. That to fellow ponies? Not on my watch. She tilted her head. I swear the words, "You're crazy, New Leaf," would come from her muzzle any second now.
You gotta get through hundreds upon hundreds of ponies to even see the boss.
I was told, but that only encouraged me. However, truth be told, beating hundreds of ponies is hard to do, but I'm only after one, as it seemed. Psh, not if I sneak in and get up close and personal. And I would too. My observant eyes and a healthy dose of paranoia, coupled with my smarts, made it hard to find me when needed. Combine that with my special talent, aka my cutie mark, and you got secret agent pony material. She thought about it and nodded eventually. I toasted Compound sitting at the bar later that evening, having some of the best apple cider since I can remember. The mare serving it did her part too, though. The apple-green girl danced around smoothly while being a waitress, and her rust-colored mane was brushed really smoothly. She was also a unicorn who turned actual apples into cider as she served them.
Woohoo, this is awesome!
Compound squealed while chugging the cider and giving me an unsuspecting smirk. The ponies here were having fun, full of joy and relaxed. This is what I needed, dearly. I raised my hoof, ordering 2 more rounds of cider for both me and Compound. I returned the smirk, and before I knew it, I had a flat-out race on my hooves. Ha! There's no challenge I back away from. We
kept drinking, and after a while, music started to play. I felt so giddy, jumpy. Oh no. Catchy music, my arch nemesis. A very familiar tone on the radio. I started shaking my head and stomping my hooves to the beat, while Compound did her thing and got even more cider for us. Ponies were dancing, having cider, some food, and cider after cider I'd swallowed and kept up with Compound, who didn't give me a hoof either. And I was getting very tipsy and lightheaded. My words became incomprehensible, babbling to others, but it made sense to me. That's all that really mattered. I leaned back on the stool I was sitting, a little far, too far. I tipped back and fell off the stool I was sitting on. My saddlebag, no, slid down, my wings exposed. Every pony who had any form of firearm on them was pointing them at me, and I was unfortunately still too sober to see that. Horse apples, this is what it is that I was so afraid of.
Looks like the goddess herself is sending the monsters right into our lines now.
The bartender, a white pony, unicorn I think, I couldn't really see more.
No, I'm not one of those. Had her believe it, all Alcorns do in this wasteland is kill other ponies.
A stallion on a stool beside me added his own wrong opinion, might I add.
Well, what if he's the exception to the rule and you're all wrong?
Compound. Her voice. I recognized it.
Even if that's true, how in the wastelands are you going to prove that? You're just babbling.
The bartender barked at her.
So are you, Smarty.
Compound returned. This was getting heated up. I felt like crying at this point. A pair of wings on a unicorn? Enough to get a bar of ponies pointing their guns at you? Great, what this world has just come to. Sometimes I wonder why I keep going.
Well, he teleported multiple generations of some of your families around here.
Another familiar voice. Dr. Septic. I forgot. He was the pony who invited us to come here. He told them about the orb and about the pony who did all the teleporting in this town, who was myself. Ponies. They stood up for me, a guy that they didn't even know for a day. Well, I did have something to prove myself. I hate having to prove that I was harmless to the bone. If any pony wanted to be close to me, a basic understanding of trust was essential. I'm a crazy horse through and through sometimes. That is nothing new. But just because I'm so different doesn't mean I'm some monster. On a side note, if I were one of those bad alicorns, that whole bar would have been turned into cinders years ago. I wasn't going to stop being myself now. I got up from the floor, but I did want to see the look on their silly faces when they were all proven wrong. An apology was the least that they owed me for scaring the living piss out of me.
I don't buy it, but I can't speak against it either. I'm letting you be, but if I see something...
I interrupted his threats. I've had enough of his arrogant and ignorant babbling. I levitated something from my saddlebag. A white little crystal-like orb, a memory orb as it was called nowadays. My most cherished treasure. I burped from having more than my fill of cider.
Proof.
The bartender came close, took the orb.
If he's right, you owe us a lot of cider for the night, old-timer.
Compound spoke, as if he knew my thoughts.
Ah, fine.
He lowered his horn. The orb brought the white ruffian into my world, albeit for only a few minutes. A world of peace and harmony, a world that I call home.
Holy Celestia, slap me where it hurts,
he muttered as the vision finally passed.
Wild green meadows, clouds, free skies, flowers, and clean rivers.
More descriptive words came out of his mouth, and I could see it in his eyes. He was absolutely mind blown, as I would like to sum it up in simple words. Others started to lower their weapons. The bar pony followed, doing so.
I never knew how pretty our land was before all this went down, but Colt, I no more now. I feel dumb now. No better than one of them raiders shooting fellow ponies.
Murmur erupted into hefty discussions. A moment later, ponies were sat down, going back to their business, but eyeing me with slight suspicion, but I could totally understand.
New Leaf? Huh. Well, what is it you're doing now? What would an honest and true alicorn be up to in this downer of a world?
I got interrogated what felt like the 10th time today, but at least I was out of the thickest mess, it felt like. At least. Thanks to the friends that I had made. Friendship never changes, even when the face of the world does. The orb was for, admittedly, rubbing it in, but also for showing where I'm from, where my heart lies, and what my ultimate destiny is. I looked back at the bar pony.
To set it straight,
I worded my intentions clear and simple.
well, let's hope you do better than some of them heroes out there that you hear about.
He said, finally dashing off and returning. Platters of food, in particular hay burgers, fresh cookies, and a giant mug of cider, back from the kitchen? He levitated them towards where I was set with compound. Other heroes? It didn't make sense to me what he was talking about, speaking of other heroes. Still, sort of half drunk, I got back onto the stool I fell from. Holy Celestia. Now that's what I call worth.
That counting for a sorry?
He muttered, and I smiled at him and explained. I understood why he did what he did. Fear.
Sure, it's fine though. I mean, many would have done the same. There have been reports of evil alicorns, and you couldn't know any better. You were protecting what is dear to you here. I spoke looking straight into his eyes. Right as rain, I reckon. Enjoy the rest of the night if you may. I feel like a party pooper.
Smiling, and then went back to work. I looked back at compound.
So, Your Majesty, I suggest we enjoy this. I've not gotten to see this much food in ages.
She gave me one heck of a cheeky wink, and I blushed brightly. The one thing about being an alicorn back in the day that made me uncomfortable was the whole bowing and stuff. I did what I did not for honor, but for every pony because I loved caring for them. As I do now.
You're pretty tame and sweet for a thunder-wielding and mild teleporting horse.
She went on, and I swear my head was red like a tomato by this point, and she giggled, enjoying my embarrassment, and boy did I have fun too. I've not been flattered like this ever if I do think back. I felt like a million rocks on my back melted away in a single evening. My head felt so clear. After a few more hay burgers and some cider to wash it down, Septic made his way over here and sat down, gazing at me, probably puzzled at just who the heck I was. Shoot, I was feeling like a celebrity already.
Well, if you need any stuff from my shop, I'll always be around.
The red earth pony stallion nodded, smiling at us. We toasted on to the evening, which truly was spectacular in many, many ways. A dizzy trot back to my underground home, and a very loud from the box. Later, we were back inside, giggling the whole way through. I was completely drunk. I needed some rest, badly.
The sun's big, pretty, and shiny at night.
I grinned at her like a fool, and all I got was wide laughter.
About as big as your headache tomorrow morning, I bet.
I felt super confident, like nothing could get me, like I was on top of the world.
Maybe, but not me. I'm too innocent for that.
Compound put her belongings in the bag that I'd given her, along with some leftover hay burgers from today. Those were really hoofy to have as a snack. She watched me in curiosity. I was drunk, but I wasn't drunk enough to get my plushie from my bag, and sat onto the bed, which was, as I've come now to realize, only one bed, but it was fairly big. She gasped, looking at my plushie as I started cuddling it.
The guy who fried me today is into plushies?
I had her attention all right, albeit unexpectedly so.
Well, it gets lonely at night, so sometimes...
She sat down next to me and put a hoof right onto my mouth as I was speaking.
Well, you're not lonely tonight, though, so you can hug me all you want.
She grinned and curled up on the bed. I got the blanket out. I was trying to piece together in my head that another pony was here, in this very place that I napped in. I curled up next to her, shyly at first, but hugged her gently and smiled at her as she did, and tucked us both in.
You did teach me today that you don't need a reason to be nice and caring with one another. And you're right, that feels warm.
She smirked at me, her mint-colored hat peeking out, her topaz-colored eyes looking right back at me. Soft coat and cozy, too. We exchanged looks at each other for quite a few moments before we both fell asleep, cuddling, both safe and sound. A first in a while in these wastelands.